Hi YouTube. Before we get started with the video, I just want to make one thing very clear. I'm a big personal responsibility guy. I feel like I own my own actions. Where I am in life is typically a result of my own decisions. Okay, and that view, hopefully, my views in this video hopefully complement that. They don't contradict it. Okay, but we have a saying at work: we're easy on the person, hard on the process. Okay, so when somebody makes a mistake, what we do is when we start troubleshooting that mistake, we look at the process and we look at how they were allowed to make that mistake. We don't just flog the person anymore. I mean, it kind of used to happen, right? But now we look at the process. So we're tough on the process, easy on the person. And it's actually a better way of looking at it because it reduces future mistakes. And we've actually, we've done some pretty good things with that kind of philosophy. And what it does is it makes me take a hard look at the system today and the way it's set up. And I feel like you have been set up to fail, okay? From a very early age. Your little brain was hardwired a certain way, and it's very difficult to undo. I know that this is probably a shared experience. I don't think my childhood was unique in any way. But, your parents worked all week, and they were very content on Saturday mornings to let you just kind of hang out in front of the TV, and you were content, and they were happy that you were content, and you'd sit there in your little foot pajamas. And I remember it started out with Johnny Quest. That was the first cartoon at 6:30 in the morning. And literally, I had my whole schedule laid out. I knew, we had 3 channels, and I knew which cartoons were on each of the 3 channels. And for 6 hours, I sat there like a little zombie watching cartoons. And in the course of that 6 hours, you were just bombarded with advertising. Anything a kid could ever want was shown to you during the course of the 6 hours. And it's so funny too, right? They show these toys at their absolute best. They're working optimally, and it's just something that you really desire. And the funny thing is yes, your parents gave in and got you some of it. And then what'd you do? Basically, it ended up either sitting in your closet, under your bed, on your bureau, and you played with them for a little while, and then you were done. And that's still true today. You go into any kid's room, it's going to be loaded with toys, and hardly any of them get touched. And, every parent made the same threat. What am I doing buying these toys? What are you doing? And then you'd be bored someday, and you tell your father you were bored, and he'd always look at you exasperated and say, wait a minute, I just bought a whole room full of toys. Go find something to do. That's not unique. And it was funny, you just wanted all this stuff. And the irony is, as a kid, you don't even realize it, but you have freedom. You can do whatever you want. You don't have the weight of the world on your shoulders and the weight of providing. You are free. And yet, you just want stuff. We'll get to that again later. You don't even really enjoy what you have. And then it gets worse because shortly thereafter, you get introduced to your first baptism into a social setting. You go to public school. And you quickly realize that all the kids that come from money are treated a little differently. They're treated a little better. They get the cool rooms, they get the cool toys. They get the parents that can afford to just kind of, throw money at all this stuff. And quickly a feeling of self-loathing kind of starts to kick in. And you start to associate your self-worth by what you have. And that's when the whole, keeping up with the Joneses mentality starts to kick in. And that's even, it gets exacerbated in high school too, right? When you start discovering girls and you start to feel like you can't really measure up with some of the kids that have all the stuff. So now you have that mentality. And now you have to make some of the hardest financial decisions you've ever had to make. Meanwhile, the public school system is terrible at teaching financial literacy to kids. Terrible. And unfortunately, a lot of parents are pretty bad at it too. You know what's funny? 12 years of public education, and then I went to college. It took me a few years because I was working full time. Guess how many mentions of silver and gold as money there were in all that time in school? 0. It was funny too because I went to school at a time when we had just barely been taken off the gold standard, and yet not one mention. It's like once we cross that line, we just I don't know. It's almost like they just wanted to erase it from the history books. Not a mention. So you have these kids that really have no clue about money, and now they're being asked to pick a college, to finance that, and now they're they're used to a certain lifestyle, and they have to finance that lifestyle. So what do? They have access to student loans, they have access to credit, and they live it up. You think when you're watching all those videos of all the kids having fun in Cancun and Fort Lauderdale and Panama Beach and everything else, you think that that's all on the up and up and they just paid cash for that because they saved it? No. A lot of that money was from student loans. So already they're going terribly into debt. They just don't have the financial wherewithal. And then they basically come out, and in some cases, with these humanities degrees or liberal arts. And, there's nothing wrong with getting these degrees, except for the fact that they're not covered in today's workforce. So those are the poor kids that end up being waiters and waitresses, with $120,000 student loans. Our whole economy is built on consumption. I mean, how many times have you heard it? The American economy relies on consumption. So they encourage you to consume. And that's the way that you're wired. Your whole mindset is around buying stuff. And that's really hard to get past. And in all honesty, if you don't really have that mentality, people really view you differently. And what it does is it causes you to have to work a job that you probably hate, knowing full well that in today's environment, your employer is probably looking for a way to replace you, whether you want to believe that or not. Because there's somebody out there right now that's willing to do your job for less money. That's why even though they've been doing everything they can and printing all the money that they can to make sure that the wealthy have more money, to make sure that companies are flush with cash, and they're still not hiring. $7 trillion on corporate balance sheets. Yeah, some of it's just, they're borrowing money to buy back stock to increase the bottom line so they can hit their internal metrics and give out big bonuses to the executives. Yeah, that's a fun game, huh? One big company just came out and with their earnings, and they laid a pretty big egg because that's exactly what they did. They met their earnings through reduced corporate tax rates and by buying back stock by financing the purchases. Yay for the executives. So these companies have all this cash on their balance sheets, and yet are you seeing it as an employee? No. They're not handing out raises. It's broken. This fallacy that if we simply make wealthy people wealthier, that they will spread it around. Even if they go out and buy a new yacht, that doesn't mean that Johnny Yacht Builder is going to start making more money. Because Johnny Yacht Builder's boss is going to tell him he should be lucky to even have a job, and that if he doesn't like it, he can hit the bricks and they'll bring somebody else in to make $3 an hour less. Or better yet, they'll buy a new machine that will help build the yacht even more efficiently. And yet we can't get past this I want stuff mindset until we no longer have a choice. I mean, you see it all the time now, where people are finally tightening their belt because of necessity. You know, you see these people profiled on Yahoo all the time. You know, I used to make six-figure income, and now, you know, here I am. I'm in financial ruin, and I now have to get my act together. Cautionary Tales. Something I refuse to be. It's so ironic because, you know, when you're a kid, you have freedom and you want stuff. When you become an adult, you have stuff and all you want is freedom. You know, it's so funny because I'm not a lot different from that little kid that had a closet full of toys and toys under my bed. When I look around my home, there's all kinds of stuff that I realize I don't need. And I question why I ever even bought it. You know, it just doesn't last long. And most of the stuff built today is built like crap anyway. You know, what I covet today is not stuff. I covet freedom. And until I can break myself of the mentality of thinking that I need to buy things, I will never be free. You know, I'm just like that little kid that just kept buying stuff because I felt like I really had to have it. And it all, it's a very temporary sugar high. You know, I would trade, I'll tell you what, everything that I have, I would gladly go back and wish that I didn't buy it so that I could spend more time with my kids, less time at my job. Okay, and so, you know, that's what I'm in pursuit of now, recognizing this, that, you know, at my age, I need to turn this around. There's no corporate loyalty anymore. You know, there's no raises. So you kind of have to come to this reality quickly. You know, and it was the system that basically encourages this type of behavior. Think about smoking during the heyday of Hollywood, right? They glamorized smoking. The tobacco lobby made sure that tobacco products were featured prominently in movies. And they got people hooked in. And you know, that was obviously very bad for people, you know, because they became addicted very quickly. And it's not a lot different with the way that they encourage consumerism and how you get roped into that very quickly and you get addicted. And it's very hard to stop. Luckily, now today we know. I mean, look, there's nothing you really could have done without realizing. You know, you don't. It's like with the tobacco. Right, I said this really poorly, but you didn't know that smoking was bad for you. And then by the time you did, it may have been too late for some, but for the next generation, they recognize, okay, smoking is bad, I'm not even going to pick it up. And we're starting to see smoking rates decline. Hopefully, you know, people will realize that the way that I'm living is not good for me long term, and I'm walking a tightrope here. And that what I really want out of life is not stuff, but freedom. I mean, you were set up to fail, but this is something that you can overcome and kind of change things around a little bit.